Welcome back to another episode of Your Hope-Filled Perspective, where it's always our desire to restore hope, renew minds, and empower listeners to live in their God-given identity. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Bengtson, and I'm excited about this program because today we're talking about how to improve your health and your weight. If you have followed any of my story, you know that both my husband and I have been on a health journey for quite a while. And so I've started to delve into different things we can do to maximize our health. And we're going to talk about that today. But first, I want to share with you James 4, verse 7, that says, "Submit yourself to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." That is such a powerful verse because so many things hold us captive, whether it's food or body image or what we think is the model of perfection. But really, we want God's view and we want his help to submit and stay away from the enemy of our soul who would love nothing more than to steal, kill, and destroy us. Today's guest is my friend, Susan Neal. She's an author. We're going to be talking about some of her books. She's also a speaker and a certified health and wellness coach whose background is actually in nursing and health services. And that led her to see new ways to educate and coach people to overcome health challenges. Her passion and mission are to improve the health of Americans. Now, for my listeners who are not from the United States, we're not excluding you. It just happens to be where she practices. She has several award-winning books in her Healthy Living series, including 7 Steps to Get Off Sugar and Carbohydrates, the Christian Study Guide for 7 Steps to Get Off Sugar and Carbohydrates, Healthy Living Journal, the Healthy Living series, which is 3 books in one, as well as Solving the Gluten Puzzle. Boy, we have a whole lot to talk about. In fact, we've already decided we can't talk about it all in one episode, so we're going to have 2 episodes. Welcome to the program, Susan. We got a lot to talk about.
Oh, thanks so much, Michelle. Looking forward to it.
I mentioned some of your books, but what is your newest book for kiddos?
It's called Eat God's Food, a kid's guide to healthy eating.
Oh, I'm excited. That will be the topic of our next episode. But today we're going to be talking about how to improve your health and weight. And Susan, I interview people every week, and it seems like the common thread is that so often for many of us, our passion comes out of our own hurts and
Mm.
trials. Have you ever struggled with health issues? How did you get interested in healthy living?
So it was a decade ago. Gosh, a decade ago, I was turning 50 next month. And I had had an abscess tooth that I didn't even realize that I had. And it was in my body and it was poisoning my whole body. And during a like 15-month period, I had like first diagnosis was depression, ovarian cyst, then hormonal imbalance, adrenal fatigue, a hole in my retina, anemia, which it went on and on for 10 medical diagnoses. And prior to turning 50, I was very healthy. Very healthy, other than experiencing, the normal perimenopausal symptoms that, we all struggle with at that, turn of life age. And so I was just a shipwreck. I was a mess and I could barely get out of bed. It was terrible. And the doctors, I had like 3 different doctors. I had 2 surgeries. I had uterine polyps as well. So I had double periods. I had to, when they found the abscess, I had to take steroids as well as antibiotics for 2 weeks. After that, I had a Candida overgrowth in my gastrointestinal tract that I didn't understand, even being a nurse, because in nursing school, I was never educated about an overgrowth of this yeast that can occur after your antibiotics strip your gastrointestinal tract of all your good beneficial probiotics. And I went to different alternative therapies. I tried acupuncture, massage, chiropractor, and my stools were very different. And so I went to a colonic therapist, and she found that I had a candida overgrowth. And that began my education about this. And I had to recover from that as well.
Oh my goodness, what a trek.
It
But
was.
it changed everything for you, didn't it?
Oh, it did. It did. Yeah. I went from, being the caretaker of a family and happy mother and just, working in my church and, Christian author and all sorts of things to laying in bed and barely getting out of bed. And my family had to go grocery shopping and I couldn't. And I could barely function as a human being to take care of myself.
Now, I know that some of my audience are from other countries other than the United States, but will you share some of the surprising health statistics for America?
Yeah, it's so sad. 50% of Americans suffer with a chronic illness or disease. It's half of us. And 42% suffer from obesity. And, with obesity and being overweight, you have so many of these health problems that go with it. And I was on that path. I mean, I had all those medical diagnoses and I was on the path, with gaining all this weight because the candida loves sugar, carbohydrates, and alcoholic beverages. So I was craving those items, whereas before I might have two candy bars year. Now I was having a little, Ghirardelli in chocolate every single night. Oh my gosh. And I had no idea what was going on with me. I was gaining all this weight, and it was the candida in my gastrointestinal tract that was craving all this food, and I had no idea.
Wow. Do you believe that there are root causes when a person gets hooked on sugar and refined carbohydrates?
Yes, yes. So one of them is the candida. A second one is food addiction. A third one is stress eating. Just think of all the stress eating we have had in the past year and a half with the pandemic. And then the next one is an emotional connection with food. So each of them has its own component. Do you want me to go into each one?
Yeah, let's talk about those.
Okay. So the first one with the candida, I created a quiz to help listeners to understand if they might have this overgrowth, because God created our bodies to have, a beautiful balance of probiotics and a little bit of the yeast in our GI tract and have it balanced. But when you have antibiotics, it wipes out the probiotics and the bad guy candida overgrows, and he will grow roots into the lining of your gastrointestinal tract. And then those holes start causing food allergies, and you start to become sensitive to this food or to that food that you never were before. And so to be diagnosed or to look at the symptoms and figure out if you may have it, go to candyquiz.com. That's CANDI quiz.com. And if you go there, you can check all the symptoms, see if you might have it. There's even a test in there to do. And if you do, then you need to starve the guy. This guy is like a monster in your gut, and you have no control of his eating habits. You eat in a manner that you have no control over. I completely understand this. And so that is one cause. And what you have to do is you have to kill the guy by starving him. And you got to take an anti candida cleanse. And you need to re inoculate your gastrointestinal tract with probiotics. And you want 10 different strains of a probiotic. And when you run out of that probiotic, the next time you buy one, you want another 10 strains of a probiotic, and probably 7 of them are different than the first bottle, because we have like hundreds of different types of probiotics in our gastrointestinal tract, and we don't know which one we need unless we take an expensive stool test. So, number one. Number two is stress eating. So, with the pandemic, jobs, income, isolation, depression, so much has occurred, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
So with that comes stress eating. And so there we need to look at forms to relieve our stress. How do you relieve your stress? I love to do Christian meditation. I also love to perform Christian yoga and meditate on Bible verses while I'm practicing. So I like to walk in the woods. When we go out into nature, it like resets our brain, and it like just enhances our neural pathways. It relieves our stress. So I also like to swim and exercise. So what forms of stress relief do you like to do, and what would be beneficial for you to incorporate into your life so that you don't then turn to food for stress eating? So that's number two. And then number three is an emotional connection with food. None of us get out of this life without some sort of trauma. It's just the way it is. And so my readers of my book, 7 Steps to Get Off Sugar and Carbohydrates, asked for something more. They're like, Susan, I need more. Had this emotional connection. So I wrote this book, Christian Study Guide for 7 Steps to Get Off Sugar and Carbohydrates. Healthy eating for healthy living with God's food. So we need to go to the Lord for healing. And there's many different pathways for that, whether we receive counseling. But this book looks at Bible verses, it looks at accountability partner, it looks at different stories within the Bible, and how others came to healing. And so this book helps to provide a healing journey. So you're no longer stuffing your anger with food, you're no longer using food for comfort, and instead you're trying to turn to the Lord. So then that's number three. And then number four is a food addiction. So if you become addicted to sugar, and like you were saying, it is real, right?
It is real.
Yes.
I've been
So
there.
so we can become addicted to sugar. And if this occurs, what happens is that when you see that delicious item that you want, that frappuccino, that cheesecake, the chocolate torte, whatever it may be, you focus, and that is what you want. You cannot stop. You are laser focused. You are going to go after that. And you release dopamine in the same brain receptors that opiate drugs release dopamine. So they have done MRI imaging of people who are addicted to sugar and people who are addicted to some form of an opiate drug, and the same areas light up in the brain. And I have links to that in this book, the 7 Steps book. So there a remapping of the brain occurs. And you part of overcoming this is understanding it. So much of it is, even if you're just an alcoholic, it's kind of like, okay, acceptance is the first step, understanding it. Okay, so you understand this. So like one of my steps in the 7 steps is remove all those food items that trigger you out of your home. You don't see them, you don't visualize them. If commercials trigger you, turn them off immediately, turn the station, don't watch them. Whatever triggers you, just like an alcoholic should not go into a bar. That's going to be a trigger.
Mhm.
So, whatever is a trigger for you, maybe it's not going to Starbucks because you're going to want the Frappuccino instead of the hot tea. So, remove your triggers, get your accountability and prayer partner, and understand that when you eat that type of food, it releases dopamine in the brain. But did you know you can get dopamine from hugging your partner, from petting your dog or your cat, from hugging and reading to your grandchild or your child, going out and taking a walk, swimming, exercising, singing praise music to the Lord, going to church. There are so many different other methods that you can use to release the dopamine to make you feel good. So, those were the four key ways that we become addicted to sugar and carbs, and then the strategies to overcome them.
Such good advice. And I think my favorite are the things that you suggested that can get that dopamine release, that feel good chemical that really does make us feel better in other ways besides harmful substances.
Right?
And the research shows you only need 10 minutes of physical exercise to get a dopamine release that will change your mood. Now, I
Mhm.
know all of our doctors want us getting 45 minutes to an hour of physical exercise. And if you can do that, awesome. But just 10 minutes of taking a walk or swimming or kayaking will have the beneficial mood effect that we're talking about that you get when you eat that candy bar or that ice cream cone. Friends, we've got so much more to talk about in terms of how to live healthy, how to improve your health and weight. And we'll talk about that more when we come back from this break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to your Hope Filled Perspective, where today we are talking about how to improve your health and weight with expert and my friend, Susan Neal. Susan, before the break, we were talking about food addiction. We were talking about having to say no to that sugar that causes that dopamine hit, but that's so bad for our body. But before I started researching ways to improve my health naturally, I didn't understand the connection between sugar and carbohydrates. Can you explain that just a little bit?
Sure. So, uh, sugar would be, just cane sugar, uh, high fructose corn syrup. And it's interesting because high fructose corn syrup came into, like, was created in the 1950s. And if you look at the obesity curve of the United
Yep.
States and the high fructose corn syrup that was added to the food, it goes hand in hand, up,
And it's
up.
in like everything: salad dressing, ketchup, cereals. I mean, I was shocked.
Almond butter. I mean, it's just like you're buying stuff that's healthy.
If it
See,
tastes good, it's probably in there.
because the food manufacturers want to get us hooked on their foods. Right,
And it's
right.
cheap and it has shelf life then.
Yes, exactly. So those are the sugar. And then it's easy to get addicted to that. But then when I talk about carbohydrates, I'm not talking about God's carbohydrates like, fresh wholesome corn or squashes or brown rice. Or oats. I am talking about refined carbohydrates. Refined carbohydrates are white flour and white rice, instant mashed potatoes, instant oatmeal. Those things have been refined. The wheat, um, there's like 5 items within wheat, and 2 or 3 of them had been removed to make white flour. So now white flour can sit on the shelf for months and months and months. And if you put a piece of white bread outside on your porch, no rodent or ant will eat it because it contains no nutrients.
Good point.
So, and we eat white flour products all the time. The fiber has been stripped of it. See, God puts fiber in fruits and vegetables. So his candy, his desserts, God's desserts are our fruit. You have the fiber. So the blood sugar doesn't spike like with the white flour and go down. The fiber makes your blood sugar remain constant. So that's the difference between sugar and refined carbohydrates, which is what we want to avoid.
What's the connection between those and inflammation in our body?
Oh, it causes inflammation. Both of them do, right? You can probably describe that more than me as a doctor, right? I mean, the root cause of disease is inflammation, right?
And too often we don't recognize it. When we get that inflammation and we try to deal with it through a pill, and I'm not anti medication, but when we recognize that how much of this is contributed by the foods we eat, it really means we have some direct control over this.
Yes, we do. We do. And so sugar and refined carbohydrates contribute to the demise of our health and our weight. So we want to avoid both of them. We want to eat God's natural foods. And I don't go by any eat this many calories or count this or that. I just say, look at your plate. Did the food on your plate resemble what God gave us in the garden or off of the ranch? And if it does, eat it. And if it has been put into a square or an oval or a triangle, and we have no idea what food is from it, don't eat it. Do not eat food out of boxes and bags. Avoid drinks that are loaded with sugar, not healthy, they're full, and understand that the food manufacturers want to get us hooked on them, but we can outsmart the food manufacturers.
So let's talk about that for a second because I remember when Tab first came on the market. Do you remember
Yes.
Tab? I'm pretty
Yes.
sure it's still on the
Yes.
market. And I remember the first time I tasted it and thought, oh, this is terrible.
I did
But
too.
the more I was exposed to it, the more I was like, well, that's not so bad. Oh, well, this is kind of good. So let's talk for a second about diet foods, like
Oh,
diet sodas. They don't have sugar in them.
oh, they're so bad. Those artificial sweeteners that were not created by God. It would be better to eat the cane sugar, okay, than it would be the artificial sweeteners because they mess up our brain.
Yeah.
Okay, that contributes to Alzheimer's and dementia. We don't like know all the things that that does to our bodies and our brains, but we know it is harmful. As a physician, do you know specific things other
Oh,
than what I've said?
I mean, it degrades brain cells,
Right.
and we don't get those back.
Mm.
So the more we choose those artificial things, the more we are sacrificing. But so much of what we're talking about today is really understanding what the food industry has done, right? I mean, we're becoming aware of how bad things are, like the sugar and the carbohydrates and the processed foods. But then they try to outsmart us by coming out. They came out first with, the sugar free, the diet sodas, and then they came out with the fat free.
Oh, and that's again brain so bad for brain health. That whole fad that we were in the 80s of low fat, I really think that contributed to the spike in the Alzheimer's and dementia
I do too.
that we have had in the past decade because we did not give our brains the fats that it needed. We needed the olive oil and the avocados and the seeds and the nuts and the healthy fats, the coconut oil, the healthy fats. We needed that, and we put our brains on a diet that was not healthy
Yeah,
at all. So you're right, the food manufacturers, they want us to buy more of their products. They're not in to this, making food for our benefit like
right.
God was. They are into this to expand their pocketbooks and their profits,
And they do that by getting us addicted to
right?
all those things. Will you step back for just a minute and talk about why is wheat bad for us? Because again, if we look at the food industry, at some point they said, okay, well, you're right. White bread is bad. So now we're making whole wheat bread for you.
Yeah, they sure did. They
Yeah,
sure did. And that, would be better if it had not been hybridized in the 1950s and 60s. So, human beings have eaten wheat for centuries. And what occurred during that time period, 60 years ago, is the wheat went from being 4 feet tall, waves of amber grain. We've eaten it for centuries, done wonderful. And they made it a foot and a half tall, drought resistant, and prolific. It can feed the world. Unfortunately, most human beings cannot digest the gluten molecule because it's gotten so large. And that is what has contributed to um, celiac disease increasing by 200% in the past 60 years. And so I wrote the book, Solving the Gluten Puzzle, Discovering Gluten Sensitivity and How to Embrace a Gluten-Free Diet. So I am gluten sensitive. I have a daughter who is, I have two sisters who are, and our bodies cannot digest gluten. But you just have no idea because you won't believe the number of symptoms from non celiac gluten sensitivity, which was not a diagnosis in the medical world until 2010. Okay. So, can I share some of the most common symptoms
yeah,
of
please
gluten
do.
sensitivity?
I'll
And
never forget seeing a patient in my office, a child whose behavior was out of control. And I remember saying, we need to get him tested to see if he has celiac disease. And the parents were like, what is that? And that was back around 2012. So it was not real common yet. And it turned out that was the real problem. It wasn't that he had oppositional defiant disorder, it wasn't that he had ADHD, it's that he had celiac disease. So please share.
right. And there's four different types of gluten related disorders: celiac disease, gluten sensitivity, gluten allergy, and wheat allergy. So the most common is gluten sensitivity, 6% of the population, but most people don't know they have it because it does not follow the GI issue problem that celiac disease 40, 50 years ago did, that nurses and doctors were trained on. It was the emaciation and the not being able to digest the foods and it going through you and all those issues. But now it's different. So here are the most common gluten sensitivity symptoms: abdominal pain, eczema or a rash of some sort, eczema, psoriasis. It's like the stuff is wanting to come out of your body. Headaches, foggy mind. Oh, does it give me that? Fatigue, it gives me that. Diarrhea, depression, yep. Anemia, I've been like, borderline anemia all my life. Now I understand why. Tingling in the fingertips and toes because it starts affecting us neurologically. Joint pain. And then, oh, if you have the GI symptoms with it, the GI symptoms, but a lot of people don't, are nausea, burping, acid reflux, heartburn, stomach rumbling, gas, bloating, abdominal distension, abdominal pain. So, and I mean, we experience a lot of those symptoms and we don't relate it. Oh, it could be related to the wheat I consumed. So I created a quiz to help listeners as well. It's called Gluten Intolerance Quiz.com. Glutenintolerancequiz.com. And you can go there and see all the different symptoms and check for yourself to see if you think you might have a possibility that you do have gluten sensitivity. And what I must say, as being a medical professional, is that you should be checked for celiac disease before giving up gluten and wheat. Because if you have been off gluten or wheat for several months and you have a blood test, your body may have already stopped having the antibodies against the gluten. So then it appears as though you may not have gluten sensitivity, or it appears as though you may not have celiac disease, but you do. So you should always be tested first.
And friends, if you missed either of the links that Susan gave for her quizzes, don't despair. We will put them in our show notes that you can find at drmichelleb.com. We've already gone in there, listed all of Susan's books and all of her resources, and we will add the quizzes so that you can find them, because we really do want to focus on helping you improve your health and your weight. Susan, so often people focus on weight as the issue. But as medical providers, I think you would agree with me that that's not the focus. The focus should be on our health, and the weight will follow. Would you agree?
Yes, and more, and even more specifically, is just focusing on eating God's foods. If you just focus on that, weight goes off naturally. People who have, gotten my book, they're like, I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks, but they didn't focus on losing weight. They focused on improving the foods they consumed. They went to they got the fruits and the vegetables and the organic meats, and they focused on those instead of the center of the grocery store aisle. You want to stay away from the center with all the
Yes, you
boxes
do.
and bags.
It's true. It's true. You want to stay on the outer aisles. So let's say someone's listening and they're thinking, okay, I will consider getting off sugar and carbohydrates. You've convinced me. But there are others who may need a little bit more convincing. What type of results can people expect if they get off sugar and carbohydrates? The refined carbohydrates, not like the fruits and vegetables that God gives us.
For Right. So for my sister who did this, she lost 20 pounds. So in 6 months, and her bones quit aching. And so her joints, she felt better. She had more energy. Um, you get clarity of mind. You feel better. You have the energy to go start taking a walk now. Because so many times when you feel so bad, how can you even begin to exercise? But if you begin improving your diet, then your energy level comes back, and then you can start walking, you can start swimming, you can start enjoying life again, and going to those events that you want to go to, but you're just too worn out to even leave home.
Well, you've convinced me. But I also want to circle back. Oh, I hate that term. I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about dementia and Alzheimer's. If someone gets off sugar and carbs, will it help prevent dementia and Alzheimer's?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, yes. Dr. Bredinson, he is a, famous doctor who's dealt with Alzheimer's patients and done great research studies. And one of like his top 10 things to do is to have a low carbohydrate, low inflammatory diet. You don't want any of the inflammation. You want to get rid of the wheat, which causes a lot of inflammation. You want to get rid of the sugar. And I mean, I can tell the next day, like if I consume a high amount of sugar or I consume wheat, the next day I'm foggy brained. And I want to do the best work I can for the Lord. And so I want to have clarity of mind. I want to have a better energy level to be able to, do the things that, He's put me on a mission to do. So, in order to do that, I need to avoid those substances. And I also want to take care of myself for my kids. I don't want them, to have to deal with a parent who has Alzheimer's and dementia. So I'm accepting the responsibility now when I'm in my 50s to care for myself through my diet to decrease my chance of getting those devastating diseases of the mind. And yeah, I've experienced them firsthand. My mother, she got dementia after a stroke, so it was stroke related.
Mhm.
And my father in law had Alzheimer's, and the last 4 years of taking care of them in their lives was very difficult.
Friends, there's so much more that we can talk about. We're going to take a real quick commercial break, but I want you to come back so that we can continue our discussion on how to improve your health and weight. We'll be right back. Welcome back to your Hope Filled Perspective. We've been having a good discussion today with Susan Neal about how to improve your health and weight. Everything from looking at the gluten that's in your diet to avoiding the sugar and the processed carbohydrates. Susan, I'm in the menopause age bracket. Are there additional things that we as women in that bracket need to be aware of before we close out this episode?
Yes. So you really need to be aware of you consuming more sugar, refined carbohydrates, and alcoholic beverages. And because that's what Candida craves. And so I believe a lot more people have an overgrowth of Candida in their gastrointestinal tracts than they realize. And so if we, go and get off the sugar and the carbs, we go on a like a low carbohydrate diet. Specifically, I eat meats and vegetables. I have minimal grains. I eat oats, brown rice, quinoa, but minimal grains. So more of a paleo diet. Um, you want to also exercise. Exercise is so beneficial. And again, like I said, you'll have more energy to exercise if you get off the bad foods. So check to see if you have a candida infection. Take your probiotics. And at that time, the estrogen naturally decreases, the progesterone naturally decreases. So I go to the health food store and I get a progesterone cream that's made out of like African yam, and it provides a natural progesterone supplement. And if you are giving yourself a little bit of natural progesterone, then that helps your body to naturally create estrogen. So that will decrease your hot flashes. That will decrease more of your symptoms. And I did this with the doctor. I went and got a saliva test to check my hormones, and that's a really good idea to do. And, checked the different levels, and I got prescription progesterone cream for this year. And in my later 50s, I, was able to then go and just get it right from the health food store. So,
If a listener is listening to this conversation and they recognize the benefits of some of the things that you're talking about, but it feels overwhelming to do everything at once, to get off the wheat, to get off the sugar, to get off the carbohydrates, because we know there's an addiction component. What suggestion do you have as a first simple step that they could take that doesn't seem so overwhelming? Because I know when we take the first step and we have success, then it fuels our motivation to take the next step. But too many of my patients will go all in and then they'll mess up and then they quit. So I want to equip them to be successful to stay on this healthy journey.
so the first step in my 7 steps is to decide. That is the hardest step of all. Okay, is deciding. Once you make that step, the next steps are easier. If you stumble along the journey, so many people think that they failed and they gave up. I mean, look at the apostles. Look at all of us. We are so far from perfect. We just, apologize to God and try again. Get yourself up. Do not think that you failed. We're going to stumble over and over again. We're going to have that cheesecake. We're going to eat whatever. Yeah, it's going to happen. We'll binge again. It's okay. Tomorrow is a new day. And God makes a new day every day with the sun shining. So tomorrow, start again. And don't worry about, the past. Jesus said, what, only worry about today? And because, don't worry about tomorrow because we have enough worries with just today. So just focus on today. So, and then I would say to take a probiotic and drink water. Have your 1 to 2 coffee or teas, no frappuccinos, no one of those sugary coffee drinks, no sodas, get off, no sweet tea. And get the unsweet tea. I usually add stevia to it. And so focus on your drinks. So you're getting, a lot of water. You're getting your 8 glasses of water a day. So there you go, probiotic and water. And then you can either choose to do the cold turkey, and it's going to take, I in my book I say you start on a Wednesday. By the following Tuesday, you're coming out of the fog. And that weekend, that Saturday, Sunday, you rest, read, relax. You take care of yourself. And so you want to get through detoxifying and getting that out of your bloodstream. So you could do it cold turkey, or you could say, 1 week, I'm going to give up the wheat. And I just had a person in my Facebook group. I have a private Facebook group where I answer all of my readers' questions. It's at 7 steps to get off sugar, carbs, and gluten. Anybody's welcome to join. I'd be happy to answer your questions. So I told her to start with the getting off of the wheat, and she did. But then she, messaged back or, posted on the Facebook, oh, I've been eating all the sugar. Well, that's what the Candida loves. It's going to go, if you get rid of the wheat, then it's going to go to the sugar or it's going to go to the alcohol. So it went to the sugar. So it's like, okay, so what I do with that is I say, don't eat over 10 grams of sugar at one serving. And the American Heart Association came out with a statistic that says for women, we should not eat more than 24 grams of sugar a day, because the American Heart Association has now associated the sugar along with heart disease. So I say, when I'm going to the grocery store, my kids were younger. They always knew to look. I want to buy this, Mom. Okay, well, check the back. How many grams of sugar? 18. Nope, it's got to be 10.
For our listener who feels frustrated in their attempt to live a healthy life. What hope-filled perspective would you want to leave them with today?
For me, it was okay. I love to cling to the Word of God. So with my book, I incorporate it's from a Christian perspective because if it was easy to change your diet, we would all do it.
Yeah.
It's not. So I want to tap into God's power. So I use his Bible verse, tape it to the refrigerator, the pantry, recite it out loud. And I use the verse, don't drink too much wine. You can put in there, you know, wheat, sugar, whatever it may be. For many evils lie along that path. Be filled instead with the Holy Spirit and controlled by him, and you want to speak that out loud. That is the sword of the Spirit. And that sword comes out and slashes, that negative influence in our life, and it spiritually makes us stronger. So that is what helped me to get off the Ghirardelli chocolate, to get my appetite back into control, and to overcome the Candida infection in my gut.
Friends, so much of what we're talking about today is because we want you to live a healthy life and for your weight to be at a healthy level. We recognize that it's not easy, that there is an addiction component, but that's why I read James 4:7 at the beginning of this episode. And I'll read it again. Submit yourselves to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Is it easy? No, like Susan just mentioned, if it was easy, we would all do it. But you're not in this fight alone. You have God who's cheering you on, who wants you healthy and whole. So submit this process to Him. And when you struggle, command that enemy to flee. And I would say when you're struggling because you want that candy bar or that ice cream cone, go for a 10 to 15-minute walk and see if it's still as much of a desire afterwards, because I would bet you it's not. You will get that dopamine hit from doing some of those things that Susan recommended: exercise, hugging your partner, petting your pets, reading with your grandchildren, engaging in a hobby. There are other things. Try those for 10 to 15 minutes and see if that craving doesn't wane just a little bit. And next time, it'll be just a little bit easier. I want you to get the full benefit of this episode. So we are going to put all of Susan's resources on the show notes at drmichelleb.com. So feel free to go there and get them. They are free, available for you. If you know someone who is struggling to maintain a healthy lifestyle, would you consider sharing this episode with them to encourage them? And if you have not subscribed to the podcast, I would encourage you to do so that you don't miss a single episode of your Hope-Filled Perspective. And while you're there, would you consider rating it and reviewing it to help others find a biblically based hope-filled perspective? I want you to come back next week because Susan and I are going to have part 2 of this conversation where we're going to be talking not only about her latest book, but about how can we encourage healthy living in our children. She's got a lot to say on that topic, so we'll see you back next week. Until we meet again, may you have a hope-filled week.